Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm your host, Amanda Lamb. A mental evaluation reveals that the man accused of shooting a professor at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill lacks the mental capacity to be tried for the crime. The 34-year-old doctoral student is charged with first-degree murder in the August 28th shooting of an associate professor in the Department of Applied Physical Sciences that caused a campus-wide lockdown for several hours. WRAL Investigates reporter Sarah Krueger was in court for the suspect's most recent appearance and joins us with the latest on this story. Sarah, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So I know that we've had several reporters on this story, and in the months leading up to the professor's death, we understand that he had reached out to some colleagues about this student, we believe, not using his name, but saying that he had a student who was struggling with severe mental illness. Tell me what we know about that.
Yeah, so we know he had told a colleague that he had a student struggling with severe mental illness and delusions. And as you mentioned, he did not specify exactly by name who that student was, but certainly troubling to hear considering what ultimately happened to
Right,
him.
that there were some red flags, or apparently there were some red flags. So what do we know at this point about the suspect's background and, maybe what other people who interacted with him thought about him in hindsight after the shooting?
So he's originally from China. He went to undergrad in Wuhan, China, then got his master's at Louisiana State University before coming to UNC for his PhD. And the lab in which he was working under Zijie Yan, who was ultimately killed, it was a very respected lab, doing some very complex science. He was studying nanoscience, researching in that field, and he had been with the lab and at UNC since January of 2022. And we spoke with someone who had a class with him at UNC, and he said, this was a complete shock to him. He did not expect this. He said that Qi had always seemed to be a nice person who was maybe in a little bit over his head. He said he didn't participate much in class and didn't really seem to have a grasp of all of the materials.
Okay, well, we will talk more about this after the break. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. So I am speaking to you on Tuesday. There was a court appearance today. Before we jump in to what happened, what was he like in court? What was his demeanor like?
So it was really interesting. This is my second time covering his court appearance. It's his second court appearance. The first one, he was quiet, seemed very distant, almost calm. This one, he was very participatory in the court appearance, and we will get into that more later, but certainly not the quiet demeanor that he had in the first one.
So the first mental evaluation that was done on him came back and said what?
So Qi's defense attorneys sought an evaluation from a doctor. That doctor found Qi is not capable enough to proceed with trial. The details of that medical evaluation are under seal by the judge's order today at the defense attorney's request. So we cannot see, and likely will never see, exactly what that evaluation says, but we just know the conclusion of it is that he is not fit to stand trial.
So the judge has now ordered a second evaluation, and this isn't really sitting well with the defendant, who I guess said in court, as you were saying, he was participatory, that he is not completely satisfied with his defense attorneys.
Right. So as you know, as well as I do, it's really rare for defendants to speak up in court in these situations. It's not typically thought to be in their best interest. And despite that, going against his attorney's wishes and against the judge's wishes, she did address the court for about a minute and a half. And in doing so, he questioned the legitimacy of the first evaluation. He said it was only about 30 minutes long, and that during most of that time, he was just on the doctor's cell phone, catching up on what was going on in the outside world because he had felt so isolated in jail. So he said he's not happy with his legal services. He wants new attorneys, and he thinks the claims of mental issues are his attorney's ways of bypassing his concerns about them. So this second mental health evaluation that you mentioned, this one is ordered by the state, and the state will conduct it through the Central Regional Hospital at Butner Prison. And that's all standard, that once the defense does their evaluation, then the state has the opportunity to do one as well.
And what is the timeline for that, or do we have a timeline for that at this point?
So he's supposed to be back in court November 14th, but that could be postponed depending on how long it takes to do that second psych eval. And Qi's attorneys in court said, particularly at Central Regional Hospital, where he's supposed to have his done, there are a lot of delays. Sometimes it takes weeks or even months to get these done. So they were optimistically setting the court date for November 14th. And also at the same time, they expressed their concerns about how long these often take, and just think that it could potentially violate his due process.
And, this obviously is a very important case because of the fact that a faculty member lost his life. But I think it's important to point out that this is the first of 2 lockdowns that have happened at UNC-Chapel Hill in just about a 3-week period. In the last incident, a man was accused of threatening workers in the student union at a bagel shop with a gun. No one was hurt in that incident, but there was an arrest. There was also a lockdown. So it really begs the question, how is the campus community? How are the students doing if dealing with all this trauma? This is a lot for young people, for anyone, but for young people especially.
It is, gosh, and I think we all feel for them. And it's been, several days since I've talked to students about this issue in particular, but just really a sense of disbelief from the ones I talked to, just so much on their plates, the school year just starting up, and especially for freshman students. I mean, gosh, what a welcome to college they've had. And after the first lockdown, the students I talked to, right after that, they thought, okay, now that's done. We'll probably never have to deal with something like this again in college. I got this out of the way. And then just the shock that they had to deal with another lockdown about 2 weeks later. So I've seen some students online talking about not feeling safe going into a classroom, wanting to, keep taking their classes virtually, and some even saying they want to transfer or take time off because this has just made it all really traumatic to return to some of those classroom buildings.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, our thoughts are definitely with them. And Sarah, thank you for your reporting on this. I know you will continue to follow this story. And if you'd like to hear more episodes of the WRAL Daily Download, please follow us in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or just about on any podcast app. Once you follow the show, you will automatically get new episodes every weekday. And again, as always, thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download.